So this is a bucket list sermon for me. The story isn't on any Methodist lectionary that I know, but it's my father's favorite. And for those who don't know, through most of my childhood, Daddy was a Southern Baptist pastor. And we switched to the United Methodist Church when I was in high school, and both my parents retired as ministers in the Oklahoma Conference. I heard some version of a sermon on that story at least once at most of the churches he preached at. And so this Father's Day seems like, a good try for me to take a whack at it, right? What you have to understand about Daddy is that he loves a good story, a good drama. And by good drama, Daddy usually means John Wayne Westerns. But not every John Wayne Western, because at the end of John Wayne's Western career, he started making Westerns, Daddy says, where he died at the end. Daddy didn't like those movies. He said they spoiled the drama. And really, Daddy liked a range of shows, James Bond, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and of all of these, my father's favorite device is the dramatic reversal, where the heroes seem hopelessly outmatched, and then there's a revelation that completely transforms everything. For example, there is an episode of Star Trek, the original series, the one with William Shatner from the 60s. My father liked that. It's called Errand of Mercy, and in that episode, the Klingons, who at this point were sort of evil, racist stereotypes, they threatened to conquer this pacifist, primitive, helpless planet called Organia. And Kirk and Spock do their best to rally the people, rally the Organians to resist the Klingons, but the Organians, the people of this planet, they refuse. And finally, it just seems like the Klingons are going to slaughter everyone. The Enterprise take over Starfleet, but at that moment, dramatic reversal. The Organians reveal themselves not to be humanoids, but to be these, energy beings of enormous power. They only seemed like passive, sheep-like humans. In fact, they were near omnipotent, god-like pacifists. And Daddy loves that episode. He talks about it all the time. The twist in its revelation and reversal. Revelation and reversal. These are grand old tools of storytelling, As a professional know-it-all about drama, I teach theater at Louisiana State University. I could even call these by their fancy Greek names that Aristotle called them. There's peripeteia, the reversal of fortune. There's anagnoresis, the transformative revelation. We tend to like stories that contain revelation and reversal. We find them satisfying. So it's no wonder that so many Bible stories have that sense of revelation and reversal, including this one right here. Now here's how it would happen. Now Daddy would relate this story himself, and he would walk out into the congregation just a bit. I left the story on a cliffhanger, so just to catch you up, right? Our hero is Elisha, the man of God, the sort of prophet superhero. His teacher, his predecessor was Elijah. Elisha, they're in alphabetical order, so it's easy there. But in this tale, Elisha has been helping the king of Israel by warning the Israelites of the plans of the enemies, the Arameans. The Aramean king learns that Elisha has been foiling his plans, so he orders his whole army to enter Dothan, where Elisha is staying, and end him. And at this point, my father would stop and imagine what it was like for Elisha's servant that morning. He gets up, he yawns, grumbles a bit, walks out, and sees suddenly there's a whole army surrounding this town. And he recognizes, those are Arameans, and they are going to get us. And the servant shakes his master awake. Elisha, master, wake up. And Elisha gets up, and he's a bit older, so he probably does a lot of and the servant is like, please, come out. And he says, what? Okay, I'm coming out. And Elisha looks around and says, yeah, don't be afraid. In the NIV that my father would often use, those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And the servant sort of looks at his master and says like, oh, Elijah has snapped. It is too much for him because, I can count and there's a whole army and we're a tiny town. And, Elisha sees the servant panicking. I'm going to pick it up from the cliffhanger I left it on. He sees the servant panicking and he prays this, "Oh Lord, please open his eyes and let him see." And like that, and the way my father would describe it is imagine a small circle of bare ground just around Elisha and his servant. And from that circle, all up into the hills, all through the army, all beyond the army, there is a flaming heavenly host of soldiers and horses, angels from God surrounding him. This glowing supernatural army. The servant sees, the Arameans do not, and they move forward to attack. And Elisha prays again. He says, "Lord, please," he always says please to the Lord, "Lord, please strike the Arameans blind." And they are blinded. And Elisha and his servant are saved. And my father would stop there, zeroing in on that message of hope. Just when it seems like all is lost, we can trust that God is there with us, protecting us. Sometimes we just need a revisioning. We need to see through the eyes of faith. As the hymn says, "Open my eyes that I may see." And it's a really satisfying story, that punctuated with dramatic reveal and reversal. The good guys win against all odds. The bad guys suffer defeat. And once you start looking for it, you can see, and I would encourage you, think back on all of the Bible stories you know to see if you can see those moments of recognition and reversal. You can see it in the gospel, right? The long-promised Messiah gets born to poor people who have to flee their country as immigrants. The Son of God directs his ministry to the poor, the sick, the outcast. The mighty King enters his city humbly on the back of a donkey. Christ preaches the great reversal. "Blessed are the poor, the meek, those who mourn. The first shall be last, the last shall be first. Let the little children come to me. Such is the kingdom of heaven." The cross, this instrument of shameful execution, becomes for us a symbol of grace. The tomb of defeat and sorrow opens into waves of victory and joy. Death itself is overcome. I would encourage you, review your own faith story in your life. See if you can find God working in moments of recognition and reversal. I see moments of reversals in my own story. As Mary Rachel said, we just finished our annual conference, and there I was blessed to receive my licensure as a local pastor. I was approved as a candidate for ordained ministry. I was appointed to a local church. I am the first openly LGBTQ person to be so blessed in the Louisiana Conference. I thank you all, but this was not by my hand that this happened. This was a reversal. Just 2 years ago, I could not have been licensed, approved, or appointed. For decades, people like me, and frankly, people like Mark Miller, whom we just mentioned, we could not have been. And we, along with our friends and family, we struggled for equality and inclusion and affirmation for LGBTQ people within the United Methodist Church, and that struggle was bitter. It was opposed by those who did not approve. The denomination was locked into a polarizing division for decades. In 2019, in fact, the Global General Conference met, and the attempts at reconciliation collapsed, and by a narrow vote in 2019, the denomination doubled down on an anti-inclusion stance. Anti-inclusion forces seemed to have won, and not for the first time, I considered leaving this church. What am I doing here? What am I doing here? I had not yet even begun to consider the possibility that I might pursue the ministry, and yet, over the last 5 years, friends, the situation reversed. Those who opposed equality have decided to leave, to disaffiliate. Those who remained discovered freedom to open minds and hearts and doors. And really, about a year ago exactly, the global meeting of the Methodists happened again, and the rules changed, the walls came down, and the Spirit finally said to me, "What are you waiting for?" Reversal and recognition. And I should say that the Spirit did not accomplish this by revealing some flaming army of military angels around me. Instead, my army was you all. You all who, for years, have surrounded me with love and affirmation and protection. It was Colleen Buchter, former pastor here and a good friend of mine, who predicted this day. She says, "You are going to be a pastor," and I did not believe her. It was Jane and Allie and Ken boosting my morale. It was Reverend Katie pushing me, Reverend Amar advising me. It was my father saying, "Take the next step and let the church catch up." It was all of you who studied with me, taught me, ministered to me, laughed and cried with me, lived out the life of faith with me. You all are my angels, surrounding me with the love that will not let me go, the love that banishes fear, the love that grounds my hope, the love that drives me into the world so that others can also see how beloved they are by the Creator of the universe. You were Christ's love to me and for me when I could not see it for myself. This is the best recognition and reversal I can think of. And yet, the story isn't over. Not your story, not mine, and not the story that we started with here. I mean, I got to say, it was a while before I read past in the Bible where Daddy would stop the tale. I mean, it seems pretty clear. The Arameans are blinded, the Elisha and his servant are saved. Where do you go from there? Surely it's nothing good for the Arameans. I mean, this is 2 Kings, y'all. It's the Old Testament. This is the brutal Bible stuff. Prophets like Elijah and Elisha, they weren't these like peaceful Yoda-like figures dispensing wisdom. They could wield a sword and would kill people, which is also kind of like Yoda now that I think about it, but in the prequels. Anyway, just a few chapters earlier in 2 Kings, there's a tale where, forgive me y'all, a group of youths make fun of Elisha's bald head. They call him Baldy. And Elisha has God summon 2 she-bears to come down from the mountains and rip them apart. Y'all, this is R-rated Bible stuff. So it seems predictably brutal when, as we read the story on, after the Arameans are blinded and dazzled, Elijah yells out to the enemy army that, "Hey, you're in the wrong town. Follow my voice. I'll lead you to the man you seek." And it seems kind of brutal when Elisha leads them into the royal capital of Israel. And it seems brutal when Elisha asks God to restore the Arameans' sight, and he repeats that same prayer. "Please, Lord, open their eyes that they may see," and they discover that they're looking at the Israelite king surrounded by the Israelite army. Recognition and reversal all over again. And then the king of Israel addresses Elisha. He calls him Father out of respect. "Father, shall I kill them? Shall I kill them?" We perhaps expect a brutal conclusion, but Elisha says no. He says, "Did you capture with your sword and your bow those whom you want to kill? Set food and water before them so that they may eat and drink. Let them go to their master." So Israel prepares a great feast for the Arameans. Everyone eats and drinks. The Arameans go back home. They stop raiding Israel. I can kind of see why my father didn't preach necessarily that part. It kind of spoils the drama. It's a little anticlimactic, right? Our popular dramatic narratives, they tend to end with the bad guys getting their comeuppance. We love seeing the bad guys get what they deserve. doing the find out part of their fooling around, right? And let me be clear, you can find a lot of that in the Bible, some sort of merciless comeuppance, but you can also see again and again places where God spoils our human stories of revenge and one-upmanship. God is going to punish his wayward people, but then God relents. God helps Israel to defeat a neighbor nation, and then later that neighbor nation becomes the instrument of God teaching Israel a really hard lesson. Or take Jonah, right? Jonah, who gets swallowed by the fish. We focus on the fish part, but what happens after is just as cool. It is one of the most meta stories in the Bible. So here's the thing. After Jonah has the fish encounter and gets spat out, Jonah finally goes to the wicked city of Nineveh, the wicked, violent city of Nineveh, and he preaches that in 3 days, God will rain down fire on Nineveh, and then Jonah leaves, and he sets up shop to watch as Nineveh was going to get destroyed, and Nineveh repents. The story says they even clothe their animals in sackcloth and ashes, and God spares them, and Jonah is peeved. He's like, he makes a complaint to God. He says, I knew you'd chicken out. I'm paraphrasing here, but there's a little bit of like God always chickens out there. Jonah tells God, you are so merciful. And God answers Jonah, you bet I am. The whole deal isn't about your personal satisfaction. It's not about entertaining your sense of who deserves what. This is about my love for all people, even the Ninevites and even their animals, he says. We see that Jonah lesson in today's story. Elisha corrects Israel's kings. This is not your victory. This is not about you. This is God's justice. And God invites enemies to a feast. God's love is bigger than just my side. God's story, our story, is bigger than this drama of us versus them. I admit, I like movies where those who hurt or frighten people learn a lesson, get put in their place. Kill Bill, John Wick. Really, the end of any old Disney movie where the evil stepmother or wicked queen or Gaston gets cast down. Such stories speak to a need for safety and esteem. They affirm that, it is right to hold to account those who hurt others or act selfishly. It's right to want justice, but friends, in this broken world, our love of justice can all too easily twist into a thirst for revenge or payback. And on stage and screen, this can be fun. But in life, that kind of drama, God says, needs some spoiling. It needs reversing. Because our faith story is not about good guys winning over bad guys. At the annual conference this last week, there was one speaker who stood up and she was in tears. She asked the conference to consider the feelings of those who feel lost and left behind by the changes our denomination has undergone recently. She says they see friends and neighbors splitting off and disappearing. They see UMC making changes to its policies, and perhaps they see people like me becoming clergy. And all of those changes leave some people really disoriented and uncomfortable. They feel bad, and they feel bad about feeling bad. And look, I am for our denomination's changes. I feel that they bring the church more in line with the example of Christ, and yet, the people who disaffiliated with us are not evil. The people who remain and are uncomfortable or have questions are not evil. I am not made freer or more equal by their suffering. God's love is not a zero-sum game where they must lose in order for me to win. We United Methodists are charged to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world, and that is the whole world, not just the transformation of people we like. We are to love our enemies as ourselves. We are to view strangers as neighbors, and guys, I'm struggling to realize what that can mean in the context of past and present pain and injury. I look at the news, just the news this weekend, and I see cycles of revenge and violence, hurt people hurting the people who hurt them, who are also hurt people who hurt the people who hurt them over and over again. And of course, I don't mean that we should tolerate intolerance. I don't mean we should excuse bigotry or ignore abuse. Love does sometimes mean boundaries, but I reject the idea that love and justice require the suffering of bad guys who deserve it. Paul tells us that Christ suffered once for all. And by that, I think he means that on the cross, Jesus Christ took all of the hurt and betrayal and injury, but also all of the comeuppance, all of the payback, all of the violent justice into himself. And in doing so, Christ has removed, he has plucked out the need for those things from the beloved community that we are to create. Christ's work on the cross means that we temper our celebrations with a grace-filled regard for those who feel themselves on the losing side. After all, sometimes that's where I find myself, on the losing side. Christ warns us repeatedly against those who would pat themselves on the back as being the true and the good and the chosen. And sometimes, I think I'm in that group. And sometimes on large and small levels, in present and historical perspectives, I am part of the group that has not acted so admirably. It's a hard lesson that I struggle with often. The world is unjust, and sometimes I benefit personally from that injustice. The world is unfair, and sometimes I benefit personally from that unfairness. Joining God's work of repairing the broken world may sometimes mean then that I commit to sharing wealth and opportunities and ways of living that I had always thought were mine alone. I let go of my grip on them. I accept that things may be different in ways that I'm going to have to adjust to. Friends, this is a lesson I have learned and re-recognized again and again from those who teach me how to be a better follower of Christ. And again, it's you all who have taught me this over the last 20 years. All of you have been and will continue to be my teachers in this regard. Just as my father, my sister continue to be that for me, just as my mother in heaven remains for me. I think those groups are united. The body of Christ on earth, the great cloud of witnesses, those who have gone before, who cheer us on, the heavenly forces that surround us with love and protection, they reveal to us, they help us to recognize, they spoil to our simplistic revenge dramas. So I ask, may God open my eyes when I am dazzled by my own righteousness, my own sense of entitlement, my own tendency to pick out the good guys who deserve happy endings, the bad guys who deserve suffering. May God show us all the way of repentance and transformation. May he show us how to love. May he show us the way of holy recognition and reversal. God, please open my eyes, open our eyes, that we may see you surrounding all of us with love and care and justice. Amen.